The veil burned like frozen iron the moment it touched Thea Larkin's skin, and she knew in that instant that her life had ended before it truly began. She stood in the center of a marble hall lit by candles that never seemed to melt, surrounded by faces that belonged to another age, another world. The veil clung to her face like spider silk soaked in acid, transparent but suffocating, and beneath it her tears fell hot and relentless. No one moved to help her, no one even looked away. They simply watched as the curse took hold, as the ancient magic woven into the fabric began its work, binding her to a fate she hadn't chosen and didn't understand. "Please," she whispered, but her voice was swallowed by the vastness of the hall, by the weight of history pressing down on her from the vaulted ceiling. "Please, I didn't do anything." The woman who had placed the veil upon her head, a creature with skin like moonlight and eyes like chips of ice, smiled without warmth. "Your grandmother did enough for 3 lifetimes," she said, her accent thick with centuries. "The debt falls to you now, girl. Wear it until the curse is satisfied or until death claims you. Those are your only choices." Thea's hands flew to her face, fingers scrabbling at the veil's edge, but the fabric seemed to sink deeper into her skin the more she pulled at it. Pain lanced through her skull, sharp and bright, and she cried out. The assembled vampires, dozens of them in their finery and jewels, remained still as statues. This was justice, their silence said. This was law. She had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, walking home from her shift at the bookstore through streets she'd walked 1,000 times before. The hands that grabbed her had been cold and impossibly strong, and then there had been darkness, and then this. This nightmare dressed as a court, as civilization, as order. The pain intensified. Thea fell to her knees, her vision swimming with tears and something darker. The veil was doing something to her, something beyond the physical agony. She could feel it reaching into her mind, into her memories, pulling out pieces of her and examining them like a child dissecting an insect. She saw her grandmother's face, stern and secretive, the woman who had raised her after her parents died. She saw the locked room in the attic that she'd never been allowed to enter. She saw symbols carved into the floorboards beneath the rug, symbols she'd glimpsed once and never mentioned. "What did she do?" Thea gasped, pressing her palms to the cold marble floor. "What did my grandmother do to deserve this?" The pale woman circled her slowly, the train of her gown whispering across the floor. "She stole from us. She was human like you, but she had learned certain arts, certain protections. She entered our realm 50 years ago and took something precious, something that belonged to the king himself. When we found her, she was already dying, her body consumed by age and her own foolish magic. So the debt passes down as all debts do, blood for blood, generation unto generation." Thea wanted to scream that it wasn't fair, that she hadn't known, that she was just a 22-year-old woman trying to make rent and figure out her life. But fairness meant nothing here. She could see it in their faces, beautiful and terrible and utterly inhuman. They were apex predators playing at civilization, and she was prey caught in a trap laid decades before her birth. The veil tightened. She could feel it now, threading itself through her consciousness, binding her to something she couldn't see. "A curse," the woman had said. But what kind of curse? What was it meant to do? As if in answer, the pain suddenly ceased. The relief was so profound that Thea sobbed, slumping forward until her forehead touched the floor. But the relief came with a price. She could feel the veil's presence now, not as pain but as weight, as wrongness. It was changing her, slowly but inexorably, rewriting something fundamental in her being. And she knew, with the certainty that comes from true magic, that if it finished its work, she would no longer be herself. She would be something else, something they wanted her to be. "How long?" she whispered. "Until the king lifts it," the pale woman said, "or until you cease to exist, whichever comes first. Then let me see him, let me beg him for mercy." The assembled vampires stirred at that, a rustle of silk and leather, a whisper of breath that might have been laughter or might have been wind through a graveyard. The pale woman's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her ice-chip eyes. "The king does not grant audiences to cursed humans," she said. "You will be taken to the cells beneath the palace. You will wait there, wearing the veil, until the curse completes its cycle. That is the law." They hauled her up by her arms, 2 vampires whose faces she couldn't focus on through the veil and her tears. The fabric had settled now. No longer burning but heavy, so heavy, like wearing a shroud. She couldn't even lift her head properly. They dragged her from the marble hall, through corridors of stone and shadow, down stairs that seemed to descend forever. The cell was small and dark, lit by a single torch that burned with the same eternal flame as the candles above. They threw her inside and locked the door with a key that looked like it was made of bone. Thea crawled to the corner and curled into herself, weeping until her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time felt strange beneath the veil, slippery and uncertain. She could feel the curse working inside her, changing her thoughts, changing her desires. Sometimes she would find herself thinking things that weren't hers, feeling urges that belonged to someone else. The veil was trying to make her into something useful to them, she realized. Some kind of servant, some kind of tool. She fought it with everything she had, clinging to her memories like lifelines. Her name was Thea Larkin. She was 22 years old. She loved old books and bad coffee and the way the city looked just before dawn. She had friends, a life, dreams of maybe going back to school, of traveling, of finding something that made her feel alive. She wasn't this. She wasn't what they wanted her to be. But the curse was patient and relentless. Each hour that passed, she lost a little more of herself. She was lying on the stone floor, too exhausted to cry anymore, when she heard footsteps in the corridor. Not the quick, efficient steps of the guards who brought her water and thin soup. These were measured, deliberate, the footsteps of someone who had never hurried in their life because they had all the time in the world. The footsteps stopped outside her cell. Thea didn't move. She couldn't bear to look up, to see another beautiful, terrible face staring at her with indifference. "Open it," a voice said, and Thea's breath caught. The voice was deep and cold, but there was something in it, some quality that made the air itself seem to listen. Authority, yes, but more than that. Power, the kind of power that needed no declaration, that simply was. The cell door opened. The footsteps entered. Thea forced herself to lift her head, though the veil made it feel like her skull was filled with lead. The vampire standing before her was like nothing she had expected. He was tall, impossibly so, his frame lean but radiating coiled strength. His hair was white as fresh snow, falling past his shoulders in a silken cascade that seemed to drink in the torchlight. His skin was pale as marble, flawless and cold, and his eyes were the color of blood mixed with winter frost, a red so deep it was almost black in the shadows. He wore black, all black tailored clothing that belonged simultaneously to this century and to something far older. Every line of him spoke of ancient nobility, of power so vast and casual that he wore it like others wore skin. This was a king. Not because he wore a crown, but because everything else in the world was diminished by comparison. "Look at me," he said, and Thea realized she had dropped her gaze. The command in his voice was absolute. She raised her eyes to his, and felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. He studied her in silence, those terrible, beautiful eyes moving across her face, seeing through the veil as if it wasn't there. Thea held herself still, barely breathing. She could feel his power pressing against her, vast and cold and older than cities. He could kill her with a thought. He could do anything to her. She was nothing to him, less than nothing. But as he looked at her, something changed in his expression. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Thea had spent years reading people's faces in the bookstore, understanding what they wanted before they spoke. This vampire king, this creature of infinite power and infinite age, was surprised. "Who placed the veil on you?" he asked. "I don't know her name," Thea whispered. Her voice was hoarse from crying. Pale, white hair, ice blue eyes. "She said my grandmother stole something from you. She said the debt was mine to pay." The king was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to someone Thea couldn't see, someone waiting in the corridor. "Bring me Seraphine." Now the footsteps retreated in a hurry. The king turned back to Thea, and she saw something in his eyes that might have been anger, though it was cold and controlled. "What is your name?" he asked. "Thea Larkin." "Thea Larkin," he repeated, as if tasting the syllables. "And your grandmother, Margaret Larkin. She died 2 years ago. I didn't know she'd done anything to your kind. I didn't know your kind existed until they took me." He moved closer, crouching down so he was at her level. This close, she could see the inhuman perfection of his features, the way his skin seemed carved from stone, the way his eyes held depths that went on forever. He reached out slowly, giving her time to flinch away, but she was too tired, too defeated. His fingers touched the edge of the veil, and Thea felt the curse recoil, twisting inside her like a living thing. The king's eyes narrowed. "This is the veil of subjugation," he said quietly. "It was locked away in my treasury 3 centuries ago. It is not meant for punishment. It is meant to break a person's will completely, to turn them into an empty vessel that can be filled with whatever purpose the caster desires. It is a weapon, not a sentence." Thea's stomach turned to ice. "What? Who authorized this?" The question wasn't directed at her. The pale woman, Seraphine, had arrived, and she stood in the doorway with her head bowed. My Lord Zephyrian," she said, her voice careful. "The human was brought before the court 3 days ago. Her bloodline was confirmed. The debt was invoked according to law. The law calls for restitution or servitude, Seraphine. The law does not call for obliteration." Zephyrian's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "You placed the veil of subjugation on a girl whose only crime was being born. Explain yourself." Seraphine lifted her head, and Thea saw calculation in those ice-blue eyes. "The grandmother was a thief and a witch. She stole from you personally, my lord. She humiliated our kind. I thought you would want the debt paid in full, paid in a way that would serve as a lesson to any other human who thinks to defy us." "You thought," Zephyrian said, and the temperature in the cell seemed to drop 10 degrees, "that you could decide what I want. You thought you could use one of the forbidden artifacts without my knowledge or consent. You thought you could torture a child to make a point. She is not a child, she is silence. Seraphine's jaw clicked shut, and Thea saw fear flash across her perfect face. Zephyrian stood, his movements fluid and precise, and Thea felt the power gathering around him like a storm about to break. The veil of subjugation was locked away because it is an abomination, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute law. It violates the old codes, it strips away free will, the one thing even we have agreed is sacred. You knew this, Seraphine. You have served in my court for 400 years. And yet you chose to use it, chose to place it on an innocent, chose to hide it from me by processing her through the lower courts. You are banished from my territories. You have until dawn to leave the city. If I see you again, I will not be merciful. Seraphine's face went blank with shock, then twisted with rage, but she was not foolish enough to argue. She bowed stiffly and vanished from the doorway, her footsteps echoing down the corridor with furious speed. Thea stared up at Zephyrian, hardly daring to believe what she had just witnessed. Hope, fragile and painful, began to kindle in her chest. Can you remove it, she whispered. The veil? He looked down at her and she saw something complicated in his expression. Regret, perhaps, or frustration. It is not simple. The veil of subjugation bonds itself to the wearer through a blood curse. To remove it improperly would kill you instantly. To remove it safely requires breaking the original binding, which means finding what your grandmother stole and using it as a key. The hope guttered and died. I don't know what she stole. I don't know anything about her past. She never told me. Then we will have to search her belongings. Her home, any place she might have hidden something of significance. He held out his hand. Can you stand? Thea looked at his hand, pale and perfect and undoubtedly cold. Every instinct told her not to trust him, not to trust any of them. But he had just saved her from Seraphine, had called the veil an abomination, had looked at her like she was a person and not a piece of property. She placed her hand in his fingers closed around hers, and he pulled her to her feet with effortless strength. She swayed dizzy from days without proper food or sleep, and his other hand steadied her at the elbow. He was cold, yes, but not painfully so, just cool like marble that had been kept in the shade. You will come with me, he said. I will keep you in the palace where I can monitor the curse's progress, and we will find what was stolen, and we will end this. Why? The question slipped out before Thea could stop it. Why do you care? I'm nothing to you. Zephyrian looked at her for a long moment, his red eyes unreadable. Because Seraphine was right about one thing, he said quietly. Your grandmother's theft was personal. She stole from me, not from the court, not from the treasury. And whatever debt existed, it was mine to collect, mine to forgive. She took that choice from me just as surely as she took that choice from you. I do not appreciate being manipulated, even by one of my own. It wasn't sentiment, it wasn't kindness. But it was something, and right now something was more than Thea had any right to hope for. He led her from the cell, through the winding corridors, up the endless stairs. Thea's legs shook with exhaustion, but she forced herself to keep moving. The veil seemed to grow heavier with each step, the curse inside it sensing that something had changed, that its purpose might be thwarted. She could feel it digging deeper, trying to finish its work before it was too late. They emerged into a part of the palace she hadn't seen before, where the stone gave way to polished wood and thick carpets, where paintings hung on the walls and windows looked out onto a city that glittered with lights. Thea caught a glimpse of her reflection in a darkened window and barely recognized herself. The veil was visible now as a faint shimmer across her features like oil on water, and beneath it her skin was pale, her eyes shadowed and lost. Zephyrian led her to a suite of rooms that were larger than her entire apartment. There was a bed that could have fit 5 people, wardrobes of dark wood, a fireplace that crackled with flames that gave off heat but no light. It was beautiful and terrifying, a cage dressed as luxury. Sleep, Zephyrian said. Eat. I will have servants bring you whatever you need. Tomorrow we will begin searching for answers. And if we don't find them, Thea asked, if whatever she stole is gone or destroyed or lost. His expression was unreadable. Then I will find another way to break the curse. I am not without resources, Thea Larkin. He turned to leave and panic seized her. She didn't want to be alone, not here, not with the curse writhing inside her mind. Wait, she called, and he paused at the door. What did she steal? What was so important that it led to this? Zephyrian looked back at her, and for the first time she saw something vulnerable in his ancient eyes. A ring, he said. A simple gold band, inscribed with words in a language that no longer exists. It belonged to someone I loved very long ago. I kept it because it was all I had left of them. Your grandmother broke into my personal chambers and took it, thinking it was some artifact of power. It is not. It is only a memory, preserved in metal. Thea's heart clenched. I'm sorry, she whispered. It was not your theft. Do not apologize for it. He studied her face for a moment longer. Sleep, Thea. I will not allow you to die from this. That is a promise. Then he was gone. The door closing softly behind him, and Thea was alone with the curse and her tears. She did not sleep. The curse wouldn't let her, sending waves of wrongness through her every time she closed her eyes. Instead, she sat by the window, staring out at the city below, trying to remember who she was. Thea Larkin, 22 years old, loved old books, had a friend named Marcus who worked at the coffee shop next to the bookstore, had dreams. The curse whispered that those things didn't matter. The curse whispered that she should stop fighting, let go, become what was needed. She dug her nails into her palms and held on. Dawn came eventually, pale light filtering through the windows, and with it came servants carrying trays of food. They were human, Thea realized with shock. Normal people, dressed in neat uniforms, looking at her with pity but not fear. One of them, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, helped her to the table and poured her tea. "Drink, miss," she said gently. "His Majesty has ordered that you're to be taken care of. No one here will harm you." Thea wanted to believe her. She forced down some bread and fruit, though her stomach was in knots. The servants cleaned the room, brought fresh clothes, offered to draw her a bath. It was surreal, being treated like a guest when she was still wearing the veil that would destroy her mind. Zephyrian appeared in the early afternoon, dressed in deep blue this time, his white hair pulled back from his face. He looked every inch the king he was, beautiful and terrible and in complete control. Thea stood automatically, some instinct telling her to show respect. "We are going to your grandmother's house," he said without preamble. "I have arranged for it to remain undisturbed since your disappearance. If the ring is anywhere, it will be there." Thea nodded. "How do we get there? It's across the city and you can't go in daylight, can you?" A faint flicker of amusement crossed his face. "I am over 2,000 years old, Thea. The sun is uncomfortable, not lethal. I can endure it for a few hours if I must." He gestured to the door. "Come, we have no time to waste." They traveled in a car with windows so darkly tinted that Thea could barely see out. Zephyrian sat beside her in the back seat, silent and still, and she was acutely aware of his presence, of the power that radiated from him like heat from a furnace. The curse seemed to react to him, pulling toward him like a moth to flame, and she had to focus on breathing to keep it from overwhelming her. "Tell me about your grandmother," he said suddenly. Thea blinked, pulled from her internal battle. "What do you want to know?" "Anything, everything. Help me understand what kind of person she was." Thea considered. "She was hard. Not cruel, but not warm either. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8. She made sure I had food, clothes, education, but she was never affectionate. She had rules. So many rules. Don't go in the attic. Don't ask questions about the family. Don't trust strangers. Don't walk alone at night." She laughed bitterly. "I guess she knew what was out there. She was trying to protect me, or protect her secrets," Zephyrian said. "Maybe both." Thea looked down at her hands. "She died of a heart attack. I found her in the kitchen one morning." She looked surprised. Like death was the last thing she expected. "I thought maybe she had plans, things she wanted to do. Now I wonder if she knew she was running out of time, if she was trying to figure out how to fix what she'd done. If she wanted to fix it, she could have returned what she stole. Would you have let her live if she did?" Zephyrian was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know," he admitted. "I was very angry when I discovered the theft. I wanted revenge. But 50 years is a long time, even for my kind. Anger fades. Perhaps I would have been merciful. We will never know now." They reached the house, a narrow brownstone in a part of the city that had seen better days. Thea's hands shook as she unlocked the door. She hadn't been back since they took her. The interior was musty with disuse, dust motes dancing in the afternoon light that filtered through the curtains. Zephyrian stepped inside, his eyes scanning every surface, every shadow. Where would she have kept something precious? "The attic," Thea said immediately. "She never let me go up there. She kept it locked." They climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor, then to the smaller door that led to the attic. It was still locked. Zephyrian examined it for a moment, then simply pulled the handle. The lock shattered with a sound like breaking ice. The attic was cramped and dark, filled with boxes and old furniture covered in sheets. But in the center of the space was a clear area, and in that area was a circle drawn on the floor in something dark and flaking. Blood, Thea realized with a lurch of nausea. Around the circle were candles, long burned out, and symbols that hurt to look at. "She was practicing magic here," Zephyrian said, crouching beside the circle. "Old magic, blood magic. This is how she shielded herself from our search. This is how she entered our realm in the first place." He looked up at Thea. "Your grandmother was not simply a thief. She was a witch of considerable power." Thea's mind reeled. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know any of this. I believe you." He stood, moving to the boxes that lined the walls. "Help me search. Look for anything that seems unusual, anything that might contain a gold ring." They tore through the attic, opening boxes, rifling through papers and trinkets and the accumulated debris of a long life. Thea found old photographs of her grandmother as a young woman, beautiful and fierce-eyed. She found journals written in a language she didn't recognize. She found herbs and crystals and things that might have been bones. But no ring. The sun was setting by the time they finished, painting the attic in shades of red and gold. Thea sat back on her heels, despair washing over her. It's not here, she must have hidden it somewhere else, or sold it, or wait. Zephyrian was staring at the blood circle, his expression intent. She was a witch. She would have protected her most valuable possessions with magic, not just physical hiding places. He looked at Thea. Did she leave you anything when she died? Any inheritance, any specific items? Just the house and some money. And a box. A small wooden box that was in her safe deposit at the bank. I haven't opened it yet. I was going to, but then everything happened so fast, and I forgot Zephyrian was already moving, heading for the stairs. Where is this box? In my apartment. In the bedroom closet. They drove to her apartment building, a squat concrete structure in a neighborhood only slightly better than the one her grandmother had lived in. Thea's hands shook as she unlocked her door, and she half expected the place to have been ransacked, but everything was exactly as she'd left it. Her coffee mug still sat on the counter, half full of liquid that had grown a film of mold. Her jacket was thrown over the back of the couch. It felt like a lifetime ago, like looking at the belongings of a stranger. She retrieved the box from the closet. It was small, made of dark wood with no lock or visible opening. Zephyrian took it from her hands, turning it over carefully. There are wards on this, he said. Strong ones. Your grandmother meant for you to have it, but only when you were ready. He looked at Thea. This will require blood, yours specifically. Are you willing? Thea nodded. Zephyrian produced a small knife from somewhere in his jacket and held it out. She took it, hesitated only a moment, then pressed the blade to her palm. Blood welled up, bright red, and she let it drip onto the box. The reaction was immediate. The wood seemed to shimmer, and then a seam appeared, running around the middle of the box. It fell open in two halves, and there, nestled in a bed of black velvet, was a gold ring. It was simple, exactly as Zephyrian had described. A plain band, worn with age, with words inscribed on the inside in characters that looked like art more than language. But even Thea could feel the weight of it, the history. This ring had been loved, had meant something profound to someone. Zephyrian's hand trembled as he reached for it. That tiny show of emotion from a creature so ancient and powerful made Thea's throat tight. He picked up the ring carefully as if it might shatter and held it up to the dying light. Morella, he whispered so quietly Thea almost didn't hear. Oh my love, I thought this was lost forever. Who was she? Thea asked softly. My wife. The word seemed pulled from somewhere deep inside him. 2,000 years ago, when I was young and still believed in such things as forever. She was human. She knew what I was, loved me anyway. We had 10 years together before age began to take her, and I could not bear to turn her, to make her what I am. She did not want it either. She wanted to live as she was and die as she was, and I loved her enough to let her go. He closed his fingers around the ring. This was hers. I had it inscribed with a promise in the language of the old gods. I have kept it with me for 2 millennia, a reminder that I was once capable of love, that I was once something more than what I have become. Tears streamed down Thea's face, invisible beneath the veil but hot on her cheeks. I'm sorry, she choked out. I'm so sorry my grandmother took that from you. Zephyrian looked at her and she saw the weight of ages in his eyes, the grief and loss and lonely years. She could not have known what it meant, he said. She saw only a ring, an artifact, something to be used. She did not understand that some things have value beyond power or magic, that some things are precious simply because they are all we have left of those we loved. He turned the ring in his fingers, watching the light play across the inscription. Then he looked at Thea, and his expression shifted, became focused and intent. This ring is bound to me by blood and memory. It was meant to symbolize a bond between two souls. If I use it as a focus, I may be able to break the curse on you by transferring the binding from the stolen artifact to me. The veil was placed using stolen power. I will replace that power with given power, freely offered. Thea's heart hammered. What does that mean? What will happen to you? Nothing permanent. The curse will attempt to redirect its binding onto me, but I am too old and too strong for it to take hold. It will dissipate, and you will be free, and if you're wrong, then we will both suffer. He held out his other hand to her. But I am not wrong, Thea, trust me. She looked at his hand, pale and strong and steady. She had known this vampire for less than a day. He was a killer, a king of monsters, a creature who had lived through the rise and fall of empires. He was everything she should fear, but he had defended her. He had called the veil an abomination. He had shared his grief with her, shown her the ring that represented his greatest loss. Thea placed her hand in his. Zephyrian's fingers closed around hers, and she felt the coolness of his skin, the strength in his grip. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her bleeding palm, his tongue flicking out to catch the blood. Thea gasped, feeling a jolt of something electric run through her. But before she could react, he began to speak. The words were in that same dead language inscribed on the ring, flowing and musical and terrible. Power gathered in the air, making the lights flicker, making the walls groan. Zephyrian pressed the ring against Thea's forehead, right where the veil sat heaviest, and spoke faster, his voice rising. The curse fought back. Thea screamed as it writhed inside her, trying to complete its work, trying to burn away the last pieces of her identity before it was destroyed. She felt herself fracturing, felt the thing she had been trying to hold on to slipping away like water through her fingers. Then Zephyrian's other hand came up to cup her face, cool against her burning skin, and his voice cut through the chaos. "Hold on, Thea. I have you. You will not be lost. I swear it on Morella's memory, you will not be lost." The sincerity in his voice, the raw conviction, gave her something to anchor to. She focused on his face, on his red eyes that burned like embers, on the sharp lines of his features. She held on to the sound of his voice, the feel of his hands, the presence of him like a wall between her and oblivion. The curse shattered. It happened all at once, a detonation of magic that threw them both backward. Thea hit the floor hard, the breath knocked from her lungs, and for a moment she couldn't move, couldn't think. Then she realized she could breathe freely, could feel the air on her face without obstruction. She reached up with trembling hands and felt only skin. The veil was gone. She sat up gasping and saw Zephyrian across the room, pushed back against the wall. His eyes were closed, his face tight with concentration, and for a terrifying moment Thea thought the curse had transferred to him after all. Then his eyes opened and they were clear and he smiled. It transformed his face. The smile was small, barely there, but it softened the harsh lines of his features, made him look younger somehow, less like a marble statue and more like a person. Thea felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. "You did it," she breathed. "We did it." He pushed off from the wall and came to her, offering his hand again. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet. She stood in front of him, close enough to see the flecks of darker red in his eyes, to smell something like winter night and old books coming from him. "Thank you," she said. "You saved my life. You gave me back something I thought was gone forever." He held up the ring still clutched in his other hand. "We are even, I think." But they weren't, and they both knew it. Something had shifted between them in those moments of shared magic, shared vulnerability. Thea could feel it in the air, electric and fragile and dangerous. "What happens now?" she asked. Zephyrian studied her face, his expression unreadable again. "Now you are free to return to your life. The debt is paid, the curse is broken. You owe my kind nothing, and we will not trouble you again." The relief should have been overwhelming. She was free. She could go back to her apartment, her job, her normal life. Everything could go back to the way it was. But looking at Zephyrian, at this ancient creature who had shown her more kindness in 2 days than anyone in years, Thea found she didn't want that. The thought of going back to her small, safe, ordinary life felt like suffocation. "What if I don't want to go back?" The words came out before she could think better of them. Zephyrian went very still. "What do you mean?" "I mean..." Thea struggled to find the words. "These past few days have been terrible, but they've also been the most real thing I've experienced in years. I've been sleepwalking through my life, just existing, not really living, and I know it's probably insane, but I don't want to go back to that. I want..." She trailed off, unsure how to finish. "You want what?" His voice was soft, dangerous. "I want to understand this world. Your world. I want to know more about what my grandmother was, what I might be. I want..." She met his eyes, feeling brave and reckless and alive. "I want to know you." For a long moment Zephyrian said nothing. His face was a mask, giving nothing away. Then he reached out slowly and touched her cheek. His fingers cool and gentle. "You do not know what you are asking," he said. "My world is not kind, Thea. It is beautiful and terrible, full of wonders and horrors in equal measure. And I am not a good man. I have lived too long, done too many things. I am a king, and kings must be ruthless." "I don't believe you're as ruthless as you think," Thea said. "A ruthless king wouldn't have saved me, wouldn't have cared about one human girl caught in a trap she didn't set." His thumb stroked across her cheekbone, a whisper of touch. "You are dangerous, Thea Larkin." "Good," she said, and meant it. Something ignited in his eyes, something that made her breath catch. Then he stepped back, his hand falling away, and she felt the loss of his touch like a physical ache. "It is late," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "You should rest. Tomorrow we can discuss what comes next when you have had time to think clearly." He was giving her an out, she realized. A chance to reconsider, to choose the safe path. Part of her wanted to take it, to run from this beautiful monster and the feelings he stirred in her. But the larger part, the part that had been sleeping for so long, refused. "I'm thinking clearly," she said, "probably for the first time in my life." Zephyrian looked at her for a long moment, and she saw conflict warring in his expression. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Very well, but you will not stay here, not in this place that holds only the shadows of your old life. You will come back to the palace with me. I will give you quarters in the human wing, where you will be safe and comfortable. And we will see, Thea Larkin, what fate has in mind for us." They returned to the palace as the night deepened, the city spreading out beneath them like a field of stars. Thea pressed her face to the car window, watching the world blur past, feeling like she was seeing everything for the first time. Colors seemed brighter, sounds clearer. The curse had been trying to dull her, to make her less, and now that it was gone, everything was sharp and vivid and almost painfully real. The quarters Zephyrian gave her were in a part of the palace that felt warmer, more human. There were windows that let in natural light, furniture that was comfortable rather than imposing, books lining the walls. It felt like a home, not a cage. These were Mirella's rooms, Zephyrian said, standing in the doorway. After she passed, I kept them preserved but empty. No one has lived here for 2,000 years. I think she would have liked you. I think she would have wanted her space to be used, to have life in it again. Thea turned to him, emotion tightening her throat. Are you sure? This is your wife's? She is gone, he said gently, and I have mourned her for longer than most civilizations last. It is time to let someone else write new memories in these walls. He hesitated, then added, if you want them, if this feels right to you. Thea looked around the rooms at the careful preservation, at the love that had kept these spaces untouched for millennia. It should have felt morbid, should have felt wrong, but instead it felt like a gift, like trust. Yes, she said. I want them, thank you. Zephyrian nodded. I will have servants bring your things from your apartment tomorrow. For tonight, rest. You have been through more than any human should have to endure. He turned to leave, and again Thea felt that pull, that need to keep him close. Zephyrian? He looked back, his white hair catching the light like silk. Yes, will I see you tomorrow? Something softened in his face. Yes, Thea, you will see me tomorrow and every day after for as long as you wish to remain. He left, closing the door softly behind him, and Thea was alone in rooms that had been built for love and preserved by grief. She should have felt like an intruder. Instead, she felt like she had come home. The days that followed took on a rhythm that was strange and wonderful. Thea would wake in Mirella's rooms, would eat breakfast brought by the human servants who were always kind and never intrusive. Then Zephyrian would come, and they would walk the palace together, and he would tell her about his world. He showed her the throne room, vast and echoing, where he held court and dispensed justice. He showed her the libraries, filled with books in hundreds of languages, some of them older than written history. He showed her the galleries, where paintings by masters long dead hung alongside works by vampires who had been perfecting their art for centuries. He showed her the gardens underground and lit by magic, where flowers that had gone extinct in the human world still bloomed in eternal spring. And he told her stories. Stories of the rise and fall of Rome, which he had witnessed firsthand. Stories of the Renaissance when vampires and humans had mingled more freely before fear and superstition drove them apart. Stories of wars and revolutions, of love and loss, of the long, long years of immortality. Thea listened, fascinated, and told him her own stories in return. Small stories, human stories, about growing up in the city, about her dreams and fears, about the books she loved, and the life she had thought she wanted. He listened to her like her words mattered, like her brief mortal existence was just as important as his millennia. They spent hours together, walking and talking, and slowly something grew between them. It was more than gratitude, more than curiosity. It was connection, deep and genuine, the recognition of two souls who understood each other despite all the reasons they shouldn't. Thea began to learn the politics of the vampire court. There were factions, old families with ancient grudges, alliances that shifted like sand. Zephyrian navigated it all with practiced ease, but she could see the weight it placed on him. He was king not just in title but in every moment, every decision. He could never rest, never let his guard down. Except with her. In her presence, she noticed he relaxed. His shoulders would lose some of their tension. His voice would warm. He would smile more, those rare, beautiful smiles that transformed his face. And Thea found herself living for those smiles, for the moments when the ancient king would become simply Zephyrian, a man who had loved and lost and was, perhaps, learning to hope again. 2 weeks after the curse broke, they were in the library late at night, surrounded by books and soft lamplight. Thea was curled in a chair, reading a manuscript about vampire history that Zephyrian had recommended. He sat nearby, working through a stack of documents that required his attention, occasionally asking her opinion on matters of policy. Do you think humans would accept a formal treaty? He asked at one point. An acknowledgement that both our kinds exist with laws to govern interaction, Thea considered. Some would. The ones who are already part of this world, like the servants here. But most humans don't even know vampires are real. You'd have to reveal yourselves, and that would cause panic, not if it were done carefully, over time. Maybe. She set down her book. Why are you thinking about this now? Zephyrian was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the papers in front of him. Because I am tired, he said finally. Tired of hiding, of maintaining secrecy through fear and manipulation. Tired of pretending we are not a part of this world. And because you have made me think, Thea, that perhaps there is another way. That perhaps humans and vampires could coexist peacefully if we were brave enough to try. Is that why you've been so kind to your human servants? Why you defended me from Seraphine, partially? But also because it is right. He looked up at her. I have lived long enough to see the patterns of history. Species that cannot adapt, that cannot change, die out. My kind has spent thousands of years stagnant, clinging to old ways, old fears. If we do not evolve, we will fade into myth and then into nothing. I would rather be remembered as the king who brought change than the one who presided over extinction. Thea felt a surge of admiration for him. You're not what I expected, she said softly. What did you expect? A monster. A tyrant. Not someone who cares about the future, who thinks about things like peace and coexistence. Zephyrian set aside his papers and stood, moving to the window that looked out over the underground gardens. I have been a monster, he said. I have done terrible things in the name of survival, of power, of revenge. I will not pretend otherwise. But I have also learned that being a monster is exhausting, Thea, and lonely, so very lonely. She went to him, standing beside him at the window. Their reflections looked back at them from the dark glass, her small and human, him tall and otherworldly. They should not have fit together, should not have made sense. But somehow they did. You don't have to be lonely, she said. He turned to her, and the look in his eyes made her heart race. Don't I? I am immortal, Thea. Everyone I have ever cared for has died. Morella, my friends, companions, allies. I have watched empires crumble and languages fade and everything I knew become dust. To care for someone is to accept that I will outlive them, that I will mourn them for centuries after they are gone. So you choose not to care, to keep everyone at a distance? It is easier. Easier isn't always better. She reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. His skin was cool, but she was learning to love that coolness, the solid reality of him. I won't live as long as you. I'll be dead in 60 or 70 years if I'm lucky. But those years could be good ones, Zephyrian. They could matter. They would matter, he said fiercely. Thea, you have mattered since the moment I saw you in that cell, weeping beneath a curse that should have broken you. You mattered when you stood up to me, when you chose to stay, when you showed me that there is still kindness and courage in the world. You matter now, and you will matter always, whether you are with me for 60 years or 60 days. His other hand came up to cup her face, and she leaned into the touch, feeling the tenderness in it. Then why are you holding back, she whispered. Why do you act like there's a wall between us? Because I am afraid. The admission seemed torn from him. I am 2,000 years old. I am a king. I have faced death and war and the fall of everything I have built. And yet I am afraid of you, Thea Larkin. Afraid of what you make me feel. Afraid of wanting something I know I cannot keep. You can keep me, she said. For as long as I have, isn't that enough? It has to be. He lowered his head, his forehead resting against hers. Because I cannot let you go. I have tried these past weeks to maintain distance, to remember all the reasons this is unwise. But I cannot. You have taken root in my heart and I am lost. Thea's breath caught. Zephyrian, he kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, as if he expected her to pull away. But Thea pressed closer, her hands coming up to tangle in his long white hair, and the kiss deepened. He tasted like winter and wine and something indefinable that was purely him. His arms came around her, pulling her against his chest, and she felt the coiled strength in him, the power held carefully in check. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Zephyrian's eyes had darkened to deep crimson, and his voice was rough when he spoke. This is dangerous, Thea. I am dangerous. I am a vampire. My nature is predation, violence, control. I will always have to fight against those instincts. Then fight, she said. I'm not afraid of you, Zephyrian. I trust you. You should not, too late. He made a sound that might have been a laugh or a groan, and kissed her again. This time there was nothing tentative about it. It was claiming a need and want that had been building for weeks. Thea gave herself over to it, to him, feeling alive and desired and absolutely certain this was right. They stumbled back toward the chairs, not willing to break apart. Zephyrian's hands were everywhere, sliding through her hair, down her back, pulling her closer still. Thea felt heat building in her, felt desire like she had never experienced before. This was not some fumbling college hookup or awkward date. This was passion, pure and overwhelming. But as his lips moved to her throat, she felt him tense, felt him fighting against instinct. His breath was cold against her skin, and she knew he was struggling with the impulse to bite, to drink, to take what his nature demanded. It's okay, she whispered. I trust you. I could hurt you. His voice was strained. I could take too much, lose control. You won't. She tilted her head, baring her throat more fully. I know you won't. For a long moment he held himself still, every muscle rigid with control. Then he pulled back, his eyes meeting hers. Not here, he said. Not like this, in a library where anyone might interrupt. You deserve better, Thea. She felt a rush of warmth toward him, this ancient predator who was thinking of her comfort, her safety, even in the midst of desire. Then take me to your rooms, she said, his eyes flared. Are you certain? I've never been more certain of anything. He swept her up in his arms as if she weighed nothing and carried her through the palace. Servants saw them and looked away, smiling. Thea buried her face in his shoulder, feeling giddy and nervous and wonderfully alive. Zephyrian's rooms were at the heart of the palace, a suite of chambers decorated in deep blues and silvers. The bed was enormous, draped in silk, and he laid her down on it with a gentleness that made her heart ache. "Last chance to change your mind," he said, kneeling beside the bed. "No changing my mind." She reached for him, pulling him down to her. They made love slowly, carefully. Zephyrian holding himself in check even as passion threatened to overwhelm them both. He was cool against her warmth, his touch reverent and possessive in turns. And when he finally did bite, fangs sinking into the soft skin of her shoulder, the pain was brief and quickly swallowed by pleasure so intense Thea saw stars. He took only a little and sealed the wound with his tongue and held her afterward as she trembled with aftershocks. "Mine," he whispered against her hair. "You are mine now, Thea." "Yours," she agreed, and felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. They lay tangled together as dawn approached, and Thea felt peace like she had never known. This was where she was meant to be. This was home. The weeks turned into months, and Thea's life transformed entirely. She was no longer simply a guest in the palace. She was the king's companion, his confidant, his lover. The vampire court watched her with curiosity and sometimes resentment, but Zephyrian's protection was absolute. No one dared to threaten her. She learned more about vampire culture, about the complex web of alliances and feuds that stretched back centuries. She sat in on court sessions, offering her perspective as a human, and was surprised when Zephyrian often took her advice. She began to understand that she had real influence, that her presence was changing things. The human servants treated her with respect bordering on awe. She was proof, they whispered, that a human could be valued by vampires, could be seen as an equal rather than food or property. Some of the younger vampires, too, looked at her with interest, asking questions about the human world, about her experiences. Change was coming to the vampire court, slowly but surely, and Thea was at the center of it, but not everyone was happy about it. 4 months after the curse broke, Thea was walking through one of the palace gardens when she was confronted by a group of vampires she didn't recognize. They were younger than Zephyrian, but still ancient by human standards, with the sharp beauty and cold eyes of their kind. "So you're the human pet," one of them said, a woman with silver hair and a cruel smile. "The king's latest fascination." Thea held her ground, though her heart hammered with fear. "I'm Thea Larkin, and I'm no one's pet." "Of course you're not," another vampire said, a man with eyes like chips of amber. "You're so much more than that, aren't you? You're the great experiment, the human who will bring peace between our kinds." He laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Tell me, little human, do you really think your presence changes anything? Do you think because Zephyrian keeps you warm at night that centuries of hatred and mistrust will simply vanish?" "I think change starts somewhere," Thea said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "And I think clinging to hatred because it's comfortable is cowardice." The woman's smile vanished. "You dare call us cowards, if the word fits." Thea knew she was playing with fire, but she refused to back down. "You're afraid of change, afraid of a world where you might have to see humans as equals. It's easier to keep us as prey, as servants, as less than. That way you never have to question whether your power is deserved or simply taken by force." The amber-eyed vampire moved faster than Thea could track, suddenly inches from her face. "You think you understand us? You who have lived for barely 2 decades. I was old when your grandmothers were born, little human. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have drunk from kings and queens, and you dare to lecture me about power?" Thea's fear spiked, but before she could respond, a cold wind swept through the garden, and Zephyrian was there. He moved between Thea and the other vampires with inhuman speed, his presence suddenly overwhelming. Power radiated from him like heat from a furnace, and his eyes blazed with crimson fury. "You will step back," he said, his voice soft and absolutely lethal. "You will show respect to the woman I have chosen. And you will leave this place, now, before I forget the laws that govern my court and tear out your throats for threatening what is mine." The 3 vampires paled, actually stumbling backward. The woman dropped into a bow so deep it was almost prostrate. "Your Majesty, we meant no harm. We were simply you were threatening her. I heard every word." Zephyrian's voice dropped even lower. "You question my judgment. You question my right to choose my companion. You question the path I have set for this court. Those are all challenges to my authority, to my throne. Give me one reason I should not answer them, as challenges have been answered since the dawn of my reign." "We apologize," the amber-eyed vampire said quickly. "We spoke in haste, in ignorance. We beg your forgiveness, your Majesty." Zephyrian stared at them for a long moment, his expression carved from ice. Then he said, "You will leave the palace. All 3 of you. You will go to the northern territories and remain there until I summon you back. That may be in a year or a century or never. I have not decided. But you will not show your faces in my court again until I permit it. Am I understood?" They nodded frantically and fled, moving with vampire speed until they were gone from sight. Only then did Zephyrian turn to Thea, his expression shifting from fury to concern. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his hands running over her arms, her face checking for injury. "I'm fine," she said, though she was shaking. "They just wanted to scare me." They succeeded. His jaw was tight. "I should have anticipated this. There are those in my court who see you as a threat, who fear what your presence might mean for the old ways. They're not wrong to fear it." Thea took his hands in hers. "You are changing things, Zephyrian. And change is always frightening to those who benefit from the status quo." He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "If anything happened to you because of my choices, I would burn the world. Nothing's going to happen to me." She held him tightly. "You won't let it, and neither will I." "I'm not helpless, Zephyrian. I can fight for what we're building." He pulled back to look at her, and she saw pride in his eyes alongside the fear. "You are extraordinary," he said. "Braver than warriors I have known, stronger than steel. I do not deserve you, Thea Larkin." "Maybe not," she said with a small smile. "But you're stuck with me anyway." He kissed her there in the garden, tender and fierce, and Thea felt the truth of what they were building together. It wasn't easy. It would never be easy. But it was worth fighting for. The incident in the garden was not the last challenge they faced. As word spread that Zephyrian was serious about change, about integrating humans more fully into vampire society, resistance grew. There were protests from the old families, threats from those who saw their power diminishing. Some vampires left the court entirely, taking their followers with them. But others stayed. Others listened. And slowly, painfully, change began to take root. Zephyrian began inviting humans to court functions, not as servants but as guests. He established new laws protecting humans in vampire territories, giving them rights and legal standing. He created councils where humans and vampires could air grievances and work toward solutions. And through it all, Thea was at his side. She became his ambassador to the human world, reaching out to communities that existed on the fringes of vampire society, building bridges. She learned to navigate the complexities of court politics, to speak with authority when needed, to defend their vision of a better world. She also learned to defend herself. Zephyrian insisted she train with his guards, learning to fight, to recognize threats, to survive in a world that could be deadly. She proved to be a quick study, and within months she could hold her own against all but the oldest vampires. A year after the curse broke, Zephyrian summoned the entire court for a formal assembly. Thea dressed carefully in a gown of deep blue that Zephyrian had given her, and walked with him into the throne room. Hundreds of vampires were assembled, along with dozens of humans who were now part of the court in various capacities. Zephyrian took his throne, and Thea stood beside him, her hand in his. The assembled crowd fell silent. "I have ruled this court for over 1,000 years," Zephyrian began, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast room. "I have seen my kind rise to power, and I have seen us diminish as the world changed around us. For too long we have hidden, have pretended that we could exist separately from humanity. But that time is over. Humanity grows stronger every year, more numerous, more technological. If we do not adapt, we will be hunted to extinction or fade into legend. Those are our choices." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But there is another path, a path where we exist openly, where we work with humanity rather than against it. A path where we are not predators and prey, but partners. This is the path I choose for my court. This is the future I am building." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some approving, some uncertain. Zephyrian raised his hand for silence. "I know this is not an easy change. I know many of you fear it, doubt it, but I am asking you to trust me, to trust the vision I have for our kind, and I am asking you to trust her." He turned to Thea, and his expression softened. "Thea Larkin came to us as a victim of injustice. She could have fled when she was freed. She could have returned to her simple human life. Instead, she chose to stay, to learn, to help build something new. She has shown more courage and wisdom than vampires 10 times her age. She has earned her place at my side, and she has earned your respect." He stood and drew Thea forward. From his pocket he produced a ring, delicate silver set with a deep blue stone. "In front of this court, in front of witnesses both human and vampire, I claim Thea Larkin as my own. She is under my protection now and always. She is my companion, my advisor, my love, and any who threaten her threaten me." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and Thea felt tears sting her eyes. It wasn't a wedding ring, not exactly. Vampires didn't marry in the human sense, but it was a promise, a public declaration that bound them together in the eyes of his world. The court erupted in sound, some cheering, some protesting, all reacting. But through it all, Thea looked only at Zephyrian, at the man who had saved her life and then given her a reason to live it. The vampire king who had learned to love again. "I accept," she said, though her words were swallowed by the noise. But Zephyrian heard, and he smiled that rare, beautiful smile that was hers alone. The months that followed were chaotic. There were challenges to Zephyrian's authority, formal duels that he won with brutal efficiency. There were defections from the court, old families who could not accept the new order, but there were also victories. Human communities began to reach out, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. Trade agreements were established, cultural exchanges began. The wall between the two worlds started to crack. Thea threw herself into the work with fierce determination. She established safe houses for humans who found themselves caught in vampire politics. She created educational programs, teaching humans about vampire culture and teaching vampires about the modern human world. She mediated disputes and negotiated treaties and became, in her own right, a power in the court. And through it all, Zephyrian was beside her. He supported her work, protected her when needed, and loved her with an intensity that sometimes overwhelmed her. Their relationship deepened, moving beyond passion into something more profound. They were partners, in every sense of the word. 2 years after the curse broke, on a night when snow fell softly on the city above, Zephyrian took Thea to a part of the palace she had never seen before. It was a tower room, circular and lined with windows looking out over the underground realm and through clever magical mirrors over the human city above. "This was my place," Zephyrian said, "when I was young and newly made king. I would come here when the weight of ruling became too much, and I would look out at the world and remember why it mattered. I have not been here in centuries, but I wanted to share it with you." Thea moved to the windows, marveling at the view. The vampire realm glittered below like captured stars, and above, the human city spread out in a lattice of light, two worlds, separate but connected. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It is a beginning." He came to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "What we have built, Thea, it is still fragile. It could fall apart if we falter, but I think it will hold. I think we are strong enough to make it work." "We are," she agreed, leaning back against him. "It won't be easy. There will always be those who resist change. But we're not giving up." "No," he said softly. "We are not." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I have lived for 2,000 years, Thea. I have seen wonders and horrors beyond counting. But these past 2 years with you have been the best of my long life. You have given me hope, purpose, joy. You have reminded me what it means to love, to build rather than simply maintain. I do not know how I existed before you." Thea turned in his arms, looking up at his beautiful, ageless face. "You gave me everything, Zephyrian. You saved my life, yes, but more than that, you gave me a life worth living. You gave me purpose and partnership and love. I was sleepwalking before I met you. You woke me up." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch infinitely gentle. "I cannot give you immortality. You will age and I will remain as I am. I will have to watch you grow old, watch you fade. That pain is inevitable. But we'll have the time we have," Thea said, "and we'll make it count. We'll build something that lasts beyond both of us. A world where humans and vampires can coexist, can thrive together. That's our legacy, Zephyrian. That's what will outlive us both." "You are right," he said, "as you so often are." He kissed her, slow and deep and full of promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears, an ancient vampire knot. He looked vulnerable and human in hers. "I love you, Thea Larkin. I will love you until the stars burn out." "I love you too," she whispered, "my vampire king, my partner, my home." They stood together in the tower room, looking out at the two worlds they were working to unite, and Thea felt complete. The curse that had brought her to this place was gone, shattered like the veil that had once covered her face. But the gift it had inadvertently given her remained. Love, true and fierce and transformative. Purpose that filled her days with meaning. A future bright with possibility. She had been forced to wear the cursed veil, had wept beneath its suffocating weight. But the Vampire King had lifted it, had broken the spell, had set her free. And in freeing her, he had freed himself. The years passed, each one full and rich. Thea and Zephyrian's work continued, expanding beyond the city to other vampire territories. The integration was slow, met with resistance and setbacks, but progress was undeniable. Humans and vampires learned to coexist, to work together, to see each other as people rather than monsters or prey. Thea's position in the court became unassailable. She was respected by humans and vampires alike, known for her fairness, her wisdom, her unwillingness to compromise on her principles. She became a symbol of what was possible, of the bridges that could be built between worlds. And Zephyrian, the ancient vampire king who had once been feared for his ruthlessness, became known for something else, for his vision, for his willingness to change, for the love that had transformed him. They knew their time was finite. Thea was mortal, and even with the best care, with magic to slow her aging, she would eventually succumb to time. But they didn't waste their years mourning what was to come. They lived fully, loved fiercely, built relentlessly. Decades into their partnership, when Thea's hair had begun to show threads of silver and fine lines appeared around her eyes, Zephyrian asked her a question she had been expecting. "Do you want me to turn you?" he asked one night as they lay together in the darkness. "I could give you immortality, Thea. We could have forever." Thea was quiet for a long time, considering. It was tempting, so tempting, to stay with him always, to never have to say goodbye, to have infinite time to continue their work. But she thought of Morella, Zephyrian's first wife, who had chosen to remain human, to live and die as she was born. She thought of the gift of mortality, the way it made every moment precious, every day meaningful. And she thought of what they were trying to build, a world where humans and vampires were equal. How could she be a voice for humanity if she was no longer human? No, she said finally. I want to stay as I am. I want to live my life fully as a human, and when my time comes, I want to face it with the same courage Morella did. Our time is finite, Zephyrian, and that makes it precious. Don't take that from me. She felt the tension in his body, felt his pain at her answer. But she also felt his acceptance, his understanding. He pulled her closer, his cool skin against her warmth, and kissed the top of her head. As you wish, he said quietly. I will not pretend it does not hurt. I will not pretend I do not want to keep you forever. But I love you too much to make you into something you do not wish to be. You will live as you choose, and I will treasure every moment we have. Every moment, Thea agreed, and meant it. The years continued their inexorable march. Thea's hair turned fully silver, her body slowed, but her mind remained sharp, her spirit undiminished. She continued her work as long as she was able, and when her body could no longer keep pace with her will, she trained successors, humans and vampires both, to carry on what she and Zephyrian had started. On a quiet evening in her 78th year, Thea sat in the tower room that had become her favorite place, looking out at the city she had helped to change. Zephyrian sat beside her, as young and beautiful as the day they met, his hand holding hers. No regrets? He asked softly. Not a single one, she said. This has been a good life, Zephyrian, a life full of love and purpose and meaning. I couldn't have asked for more. I could have, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I could have asked for more time, for forever, but I am grateful for what we had. You changed everything, Thea. You changed me, you changed my court, you changed the world, and you loved me even knowing what I am, what I have done. That is a gift beyond price. You loved me first, Thea said, smiling. You saw me when I was broken and cursed and lost, and you chose to save me. Everything that came after started with that choice, and I would make it again, he said fiercely. 1,000 times, 10,000 times. I would save you every time, Thea. In every life, in every world. She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the contentment of a life well lived, of love fully given and received. Tell me about Morella, she said. Tell me about your first love. I want to hear her story again. And Zephyrian did, his voice soft in the darkness, weaving the tale of a human woman who had loved a vampire king 2,000 years ago. Thea listened, her eyes drifting closed, a smile on her lips. She passed peacefully, there in the tower room, surrounded by love and magic, and the presence of the man who had been her partner, her protector, her greatest love. Zephyrian held her as she went, his tears falling like rain, but he did not regret. He had loved her purely and completely, and she had loved him in return. That was enough. That was everything. He mourned her deeply, and the court mourned with him. But he did not let grief consume him as it had after Morella's death. Thea had taught him that love was not diminished by loss, that the joy of having loved was worth the pain of letting go. He continued their work, honoring her memory by building the world they had dreamed of together. The integration of humans and vampires progressed, becoming stronger with each passing year. Safe houses became communities, treaties became friendships, fear gave way to understanding. And in the tower room, Zephyrian kept 2 rings. One was ancient gold, inscribed with a promise to his first love. The other was silver set with blue stone, a promise to his second. Both women had changed him, had shown him that even an immortal could grow, could learn, could love. Centuries would pass, and Zephyrian would continue to rule, to build, to remember. He would tell stories of the human woman who had worn a cursed veil and refused to break, who had fought for a better world, who had loved a vampire king with all her mortal heart. And in those stories, Thea would live on. Not as a cautionary tale, not as a victim, but as a hero. The woman who had changed the world, the woman who had saved the king who saved her. The curse had brought them together, but love had set them both free. And that love, that legacy, would endure longer than stone, longer than empires, longer than time itself. In the end, that was the spell that truly mattered. Not the curse that bound, but the love that freed, and it could never be broken.